this is totally worn out now, but it wears out with us way faster than it does with the consumers. If anything, we should probably be more concerned about wear in, because probably, most
Yep.
brands don't even let a campaign run long enough to even wear it in to resonate.
Welcome to That's What I Call Marketing, the podcast where you will hear from leading lights in the marketing world and listen to their unique insights. Well, before we get into today's episode, if you are enjoying That's What I Call Marketing and can rate or review an episode, it is a great way for us to reach new people who have yet to hear an episode of That's What I Call Marketing. And of course, if you subscribe, you will never miss an episode again. Well, for today's episode, we're flying all the way to Canada. Well, I didn't fly, I'm doing it remotely, to speak with Jonelle Ricketts, who is the head of marketing for IKEA Canada. Now, I'm a huge fan of IKEA. Globally, I love their work. I think they've done some amazing work. And I came across Jonelle's profile late last year, or in the summer of last year probably, when I noticed that IKEA Canada had relaunched a 20-year-old ad campaign. So we're going to be talking all about that. We'll talk a bit about Jonelle's incredible journey, both in BlackBerry, but also in IKEA, where she's held media roles, international roles, and understanding how IKEA works as such a global brand, an iconic global brand, how she managed that navigation between an in-country role, global role, and then back again to an in-country role where she heads up marketing for Canada. Jonelle has been instrumental in creating campaigns that resonate with diverse Canadian audiences. And here today about the massive diversity in Canada and the new audience that she needs to reach. A Spot the Difference campaign highlighted IKEA's efforts to reduce prices without compromising product quality and was aiming to connect Canadians seeking value during challenging economic times. It is brilliant. Through her leadership, Jonelle continues to guide IKEA Canada's marketing strategies, ensuring they align with the company vision and creating a better everyday life for many people. Of course, we all love those IKEA products. And we do talk about the similarities of IKEA across the world. And also, I do let Jonelle into my DIY failures. So, wonderful episode with an incredible marketer. Enjoy today's episode with Jonelle Ricketts.
If you would like to reach an engaged community of marketing leaders, get in touch with That's What I Call Marketing to discuss sponsorship opportunities.
Jonelle, thanks a million for joining me on That's What I Call Marketing. Great to have you here. And I know it's early morning for you, my afternoon, because you're based in Canada.
Yes, I am. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Well, listen, we'll get on to kind of how I came across you and all that, but I want to start a bit with your journey. I said you're in Canada, you're from Canada, but you found yourself working in the Netherlands. Please tell me a bit about what took you to the Netherlands.
Yes. Yeah. So ironically, I'm actually half Dutch.
Yeah,
My
there
mom,
you
yeah, my
go.
mom is from the Netherlands and immigrated to Canada many years ago. So there's always been a connection with the Netherlands. I still have a lot of family there. But several years ago, my husband and I had talked about, sometimes you get comfortable in life and you just think, let's mess around with that a little bit. One of the great things about working for IKEA, so although I had started with IKEA in Canada, it's very much known that there's lots of opportunities to travel the world with IKEA if you're open to it. So at one point, my husband and I just started talking and said, you know what, I think we're ready. Ironically, I was at a meeting in Copenhagen with some of my counterparts in marketing, happened to sit with the Dutch team there and just got to talking and realized that they were about to have an opening that was 100% suitable for me.
Oh, wow.
They were just curious about what they should look for someone in the role. And I said, oh, well, actually, what about me? So it was funny that that's literally how it started over dinner. And within a couple of weeks, I was in the interview process and was offered a job. And then we started getting organized for the big move. So
Wow.
that was back in 2018.
And so the move then to the Netherlands, and that was that a global role then that you were taking on at that time? Because I know you've had that kind of experience in kind of global marketing roles, which is really interesting.
Yeah, it was actually an interesting journey because, I actually took on a role that was similar to the role that I had in Canada at the time. They were just creating the role newly in the Netherlands. So I had worked in technically the Netherlands head office, were leading their paid media at that point. So bringing in a lot of the knowledge that I had from my role in Canada. But then within about a year and a half or so, I was able to explore another opportunity. And it just was a brand new role that was created. And it was within our global organization that was also based in the Netherlands. And it was actually within the communications function, which I hadn't spent time working in during my time at IKEA, but it was one of these roles where I would have to work really closely with the global marketing team as
Yeah.
well, and be that connection between, because we have to work so closely together. And, we were going through a lot of restructuring at the time. So really trying to figure out new ways of working and how do we make this come together. And yeah, so that was a really incredible opportunity that I couldn't say no to. So I jumped on that opportunity. And then as things go in the IKEA world, sometimes you just get a call out of the blue, and it happened again when it was around the time when we were going away with the infamous IKEA catalog, and a previous manager of mine had reached out, and she was on another global team that was part of Inter IKEA, which is the part of the company that owns the concept and, sets all of the guidelines and frameworks, develops the products, that type of thing. And there was an opportunity to look at, okay, what does marketing look like at IKEA in the future globally now
Wow.
that we don't have this catalog? So there was kind of a working group put together to figure out what does that look like. And I thought, what other time in my career do I have an opportunity to have a role in that? And it was an opportunity to work with many different markets around the
Yeah.
world and really get to know another side of IKEA as well, and figure out what the future was going to look like. So I couldn't pass that up either. So I took on that role. So it was kind of became a joke that I was on a tour of the Netherlands during my time there working in 3 different parts of the IKEA universe. And yeah, really great opportunity to really better understand the inner workings and, how things operate behind the scenes. And a lot of those things help me, now that I'm back in Canada, to understand how that all works.
Yeah, and like that, I mean, like it's fascinating. The global, I had a global role previously, which I loved all those interactions with countries and cultures, and really trying to understand, but also then how you look at doing things that scale properly, and what were some of the biggest kind of maybe I don't challenges that you had to try overcome in trying to figure some of that ways of working out.
Yeah, I think, there was so many different things. I think, when it comes to working, at that global level, I think one of the biggest things is just knowing that even though you have this global iconic brand that everyone is working behind, in every country, they're at a bit of a different stage when the health of the brand and the familiarity of the brand. There's some markets that we were opening up for the first time ever in Latin America, South America. So there's so many, that's a very different world compared to a
Yeah.
country like Sweden that IKEA is synonymous with Sweden itself. So I think that's really big to understand then. And really, I think because I've worked in 2 different markets, I was able to bring that kind of thinking into the discussions as well, so that people could understand, hey, remember, not everyone has this brand that's as known and as established.
Yeah.
So some of the things that may work in this country may not work in this other country. And we need to find ways to make sure that, that we can still come out in a consistent voice, but understanding that there are some nuances that we need to take into account in the different countries that we operate in. So
Yeah.
that was definitely a big hurdle. And like any company too, I think when it comes to ways of working, the bigger you are, the trickier that can be.
Yeah.
So even trying to coordinate, like, okay, how does that, I hate the word governance, but how does that work?
Yeah.
Like, who's making decisions on certain things? Who needs to be involved? We're very Swedish in a lot of our ways around collaboration and consensus. But you have to make sure you find who are the right people at the table. And sometimes you're not even sure who those people are. So it takes a little digging at times and learning along the way for sure.
It does. It's such a great point, though. As organizations get bigger, they just naturally get more complex, complicated. And no, it's not intentional. It just is the nature of size. And again, I'm sure you've probably found it in your roles where there was a point where you probably knew everybody. And then as
Mhm.
it got bigger and your roles got bigger, it was like, oh, well, hang on, who are the people that I have to
Yeah.
influence or bring along in a journey? Because you have to make sure you're doing that.
For sure. I think I especially saw that during my time at BlackBerry, and when I had joined, it wasn't even BlackBerry, it was Research in Motion, at
Right.
the
Yeah.
time, and was part of even developing what that BlackBerry brand was. And I think the tricky thing with that too is we really were in that situation where everybody knew everyone in those early days. And then later on, there were just so many people you didn't even know who to talk to, how to go
Yeah.
about things. And we were very scrappy in those early days and very entrepreneurial like, and like many tech startups, we didn't even believe in org charts in the early days, but eventually that had to change as well. But I think that for me was quite eye-opening to see how quickly that can change, and what impact that can have on the culture and
Yeah.
on your ways of working and everything you do essentially.
And get as you say, like the word, governance and thing words like that, then which probably were far and at a point of
Yes.
growth become really important, and saying
Yes.
it's kind of having the guardrails for people to work within, because as you say, for let's say IKEA, but also BlackBerry, like big global brands that need to have that level of consistency to a degree across the markets, and where they show up in different ways, you'll have that local nuance, which we will get into, because got you got pulled back to Canada.
Yes.
You missed the cold. Too much rain in the Netherlands.
Yeah, oh yeah, it definitely was not that. I definitely would have stayed longer. I think, like many people who, go on these adventures, sometimes it comes to an end at some point in
Yeah,
time. In our case, we went into this not knowing what to expect. We figured, well, maybe we do 3 to 5 years and see what happens. But I know people who also came with that in mind and stay for 20 or more. But, for us, it was really about needing to come back for family. And I think
yeah,
that's always the hardest part when
yeah,
you're away. And when we came back, we didn't even know what we were going to be going back to. Being in the role I wasn't able to continue. I would have
yeah,
had
yeah.
to stay in the Netherlands to continue that role. And there weren't any opportunities for me with IKEA Canada at the time. So I came back starting my job hunt, and my husband as well, and really starting from scratch again. So a lot of sacrifice, but I think, we definitely don't regret our time there and the adventures that we
Yeah.
had and all the learnings and the growth that we had, both like personally and professionally.
And so then you got back to Canada, and then obviously you're with IKEA Canada now. So like, get to talk me through what kind
Yeah.
of happened.
Yeah, so I worked remotely just for a couple of months, but then I ended up securing a new role with Sephora, which was really great because, a really big brand as
Mm,
well, and another side of retail that I hadn't been exposed to. So I thought this could be a really great learning opportunity. And ironically, got my foot in the door because of some former IKEA colleagues who had
okay.
also moved there at one point. How it's a small
Right.
world, how that works. Yeah, so I spent time there and really great learnings during that time. But then, yeah, I ended up getting a call at one point and say, hey, we have an opening within the marketing team, actually leading the entire marketing function. And we think you would be perfect. Would you be interested in putting your name in the hat, so to speak, and applying for the role? And it kind of caught me off guard because I think I had kind of put that chapter behind me and I thought,
Right.
"Hey,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah, I'm moving on." So I didn't really think about going back at all, but it really intrigued me, and it was a role that probably the only role that I would have considered coming back for. And I just thought, if there's people around me who believe in me that I can do this, even though maybe I wasn't quite sure at the time, I thought, you know what, it's worth giving it a shot. And yeah, so then I was offered the role. I actually, it was funny when it happened because I was in the interview process, but then I was going back to the Netherlands for a visit, and then we were in Tenerife for about a week, and then I got a call like, "Hey, can you talk?" And so I ended up in some parking lot outside of a mall that my kids were shopping in, and took the call and was offered the role, and I was just so surprised, and I think I was just kind of overcome, and I'm sitting in the car, like, trying to tell my husband what happened, and I have tears coming down from my eyes, and I'm kind of laughing at the same time, but it was really great, and it really felt like a bit of a homecoming.
You've touched on it already, but like you had that then, that kind of international experience, understanding what other markets are doing, so all that then, and bringing that back, and then leading the team. We've touched on it a bit that IKEA is a very well known global brand. I'd love to know kind of how, maybe first of all, a bit about the landscape it operates in Canada, because you touched on that, even some of the markets like in Latin America where IKEA was going in new. So tell me a bit about kind of the landscape in Canada for IKEA.
So we have been in Canada since 1976. So we are coming up on our 50th
Oh wow.
anniversary, which is really crazy to think about that we have had a presence here that long. Of course, with a country this big, not everyone has even had a chance to experience IKEA. So that in and of itself is really different. In the Netherlands, at the time when I was there, it was a similar footprint in terms of number of stores and things like that, but very different where the stores are much closer together. Like, I could literally go to any store in the Netherlands within a couple of hours, or you could go to Belgium for that matter,
Oh, yeah.
to Germany, wherever. You had lots of options, whereas in Canada, it's much more spread apart. So, and there's parts of the country that have no IKEA presence whatsoever. So, I remember years ago when we had opened up in a province for the first time, we almost had to treat it in a way that you would be opening up in a new country, because although
Right.
people were maybe somewhat familiar with the brand, they weren't as much as with people who had experienced the brand firsthand, and it didn't even know how to shop at IKEA. So we had to take those learnings into account as well. And I think too, within Canada, there's a really competitive landscape within home furnishings, and I think has even grown over these past years, especially with the pandemic and more online
Yeah.
players popping up. There's a lot of different home furnishing retailers. There's not a lot that really do exactly what we do, of course, since it's quite unique, but there are a lot of retailers in the space. You look at a lot of these big box types of brands as well that also happen to sell home furnishing. I mean, we even look at things like dollar stores,
Right.
grocery stores that also sell those types of
Yeah, yeah.
things. So the competition is really everywhere, so there's a lot of choice for consumers when it comes to different brands that are available, the types of price points that there are, and quality levels across the different retailers. Um, it's also a really competitive media landscape overall
Right.
as well.
Yeah.
I think, again, with such a large country and, what it takes to really reach consumers across the country, there's always a battle for share of voice, and you really need to find innovative ways to break through a lot of the clutter that's out there. And then, like many, I think at this time, it's obviously very top of mind with the economic
Yep.
situation, and although you're starting to see maybe a little more consumer confidence, I think a lot of people are calling it cautious optimism. There's still a lot of concerns that people have around their financial futures. And, so I think for us, there's had to be quite a big focus around affordability over the
Okay.
last
Yeah.
while. And, that idea that you want affordable products, but you also don't want to compromise on quality. So I
Quality.
think
Yeah.
for a lot of Canadian consumers, it's about value, and people can see through it. Sometimes you might see something that's a low price, but it comes at a cost.
One definite part for me, I think, with IKEA is the experience. So the experience of both the shopping, I think the experience of, the pack build. I used to find it hard, or harder. Still find it hard. My wife would laugh at me for that one, but and says more about me than IKEA. But all those things are better. And then also, excuse me, when mistakes are made by people like me, I don't know if you have it in Canada, but here, when you're part of the IKEA family card or club, and you ring and say, I've managed to drill holes and in the wrong places, and they will replace it for you. Like, we had that
Mm.
recently. I was doing something with my dad, and we were screwing something in, and he was like, just go harder, just go harder.
Oh,
And we rang, and it was amazing. So that kind of, that experience that you get, like, it's affordability, yes, but quality, tends to be good if you build it correctly. And then that experience of, if you're part of that IKEA family, then it's, things will be replaced easily for, dummies like
Exactly.
me.
Yeah. Well, I think we've all been there, but yeah, and I think that's the beauty of it, that we are here for you for any step of the journey. Yeah, it's very real, and I think this year we actually had an extra focus on affordability, and you probably saw that in Ireland as well. And we made some big investments in lowering prices. So instead of kind of
Mm.
keeping those margins, we decided let's pass on those savings that we have and make sure that it gets into the hands of our customers. And in Canada specifically, we made an over $80 million investment, and we were able to lower prices on over 1,500 products and still
Wow.
counting. And it's really great. We developed a campaign as well during that time to really talk about the fact that you are still getting the exact same product. Nothing has changed about it. We just literally lowered the price. And I think we really were digging into that insight, that we knew that consumers weren't just looking for the lowest price product out there, because they know that there's a cost to that eventually. And it's really great because I think consumers really saw that we were trying to do something to help in the situation that
Yeah.
we're in with the economy.
IKEA makes some amazing advertising, like really wonderful advertising, and even there's the really famous kitchen ad that we always find is the kitchen, or in the kitchen of parties. That great track, it was in the
Yeah.
UK, so I love that.
Yeah.
And like in every IKEA ad, it almost starts with the product, probably the insight,
Mhm.
and but the product. Like how do you get to that and then make work that people actually enjoy watching?
Yeah. No, you're right. And I think there's definitely times where we have maybe started with the product sometime, but I would say for the most part it's really around the insight, because we know that we have thousands of products that can support that
Yeah,
story in
yeah,
in a really good way. And I think that's what has helped us make such incredible work, and work that can sometimes resonate across different countries, because especially if you get into those more universal human insights. And I look back in our body of work over the years, and I think, yeah, those best pieces of work have really come from that, where people, it's something that people know and they
yeah,
recognize, but they maybe don't really talk about it. But then they realize, oh, yeah, of course, that's me too.
yeah,
I
yeah.
do that, or I understand that. So it's really about us being able to connect on an emotional level with consumers, so that they see, like, we get it, and people can understand the role that IKEA plays. And of course, it's important that our products are front and center in
Yeah.
everything we do. As we say, our range is the heart of everything that we do. So we would never go into anything without having discussions around that. And sometimes it's just a matter of picking from the many options that we have of what we want to focus in on. But you'll notice too, in our ads, we also ensure that we show pricing of, at least one thing, sometimes multiple things in there as well, because it also helps. I mean, even it becomes a bit of a branding cue to a certain extent, because people are familiar with how we do our pricing and our
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
catalogs over
yeah.
over the years. So I think, but the insight really is the big thing for me. And I think honestly, that's where the best work really comes from.
You are listening to That's What I Call Marketing.
If you would like to reach an engaged community of marketing leaders, get in touch with That's What I Call Marketing to discuss sponsorship opportunities.
Definitely. It's really interesting to think how pricing, or how pricing looks in an ad, can be a distinctive asset. I wouldn't think any other brand has that. So that's pretty impressive stuff from IKEA.
Yeah, and we always try to put in little things that, we always joke that we have some little Easter eggs that if you're looking closely, you might see. Quite often you'll see a blue bag appear. I mean, we're lucky that we have different kind of brand cues, but yeah, it doesn't always make sense to stick a blue bag in everything that you do, but it certainly becomes a good nod for us.
It's so I have plenty of blue bags in my car for the for the
Yeah,
weekend
me too.
shopping.
I've moved houses with blue bags because they were cheaper than buying
Yeah,
boxes from moving companies. So yeah,
it's so good.
I get it.
But we connected earlier or later last year when I'd seen that you re-released a 20-year-old ad.
Yes,
Now,
yes.
it's a wonderful ad, and so I will put a link to the ad in the show notes. But you might just give us kind of a brief what was the ad about, and then why did you think about re-releasing that ad at that particular time?
Yes, for sure. So the ad, I think it was originally called "It's Not a Mistake," but I don't think anybody knows it as that. To many people, it's just called "Start the Car," and it it was developed 20 years ago, and it was meant to be an ad that we would use during our winter and summer sale that we have every year. And it's about a woman who goes into IKEA, and you don't even need to talk it yet. You can just see, and this is why I think it works so well. Developed in Canada and shot in Toronto at one of our stores there. And it was, yeah, this woman going in to IKEA, buying something, seeing her receipt, and then just kind of freaking out a bit, like, oh my gosh, I think they made a mistake because these prices are too good. Like, it can't be real. And she goes out to the car and is walking really fast and tells her husband basically to start the car, to take off before anyone realizes this mistake. And it's just funny that, I mean, it was developed so long ago, but it's such a great insight, that so many people can relate to. And it's become so iconic in Canada that people will just say, "Start the car," anytime they have a good deal, IKEA
Really?
or not. It's just
Wow.
become part of culture, which is really incredible. And I think in the end, there was probably at least more than 10 other countries that have used it as well. Campaign Canada had reached out and said that they were doing this thing called the Campaign Cup, and they were
Okay.
trying to find essentially narrow it down to to be able to crown the most iconic Canadian ad of the 21st century. And we were in the finals. And we thought, wow, what? We hadn't heard anything about it up until that point. And because of the history with it, Canadians just voted and picked this. And we ended up winning this coveted crown. And then we also then kind of realized, wait a minute, this is also the 20th anniversary of this. Like, what ad can stand the test of time
Yeah,
for
yeah.
20 years? This is incredible. So we said, let's find a way to bring this back in celebration of both of these things. And then we thought, you know what, let's take a little bit of a different approach. Like, most of the ad still resonated and made sense, but we thought, what a perfect opportunity to also weave in our messaging around how we're lowering prices throughout the store and really bring that message home. Because again, it's not a mistake. We managed to get it on TV during the Olympics. So any
Oh, wow.
Canadian
Yeah,
who
yeah.
was glued to their TV saw our ad many times. I had a good laugh because I was visiting my parents over the summer, and I walked in and, started to put our stuff away with the kids. And then my dad said, "I just saw the IKEA Start the Car ad when I was watching the Olympics. Did you know that they were bringing that back?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah, actually they did."
I love that.
He does know what I do for a living, but yeah, we had a good laugh about that. That I was like, yeah, I was very much involved in that decision.
That's brilliant.
Yeah,
Oh,
but so
God.
it resonated with him as well. So he was
Uh,
quite excited.
it's it is, and but it's right. Like you're 100%. All the things you're saying there, it stands the test of time. It is
Yeah.
highly entertaining, which we need more of that. I just generally
Mhm.
believe, and
Absolutely.
the fact that people still use that phrase is used in culture is a reason why we need probably more entertaining and enjoyable advertising because
Exactly.
it can kind of permeate culture, right?
Yeah, and that's we've said the same too. There's always seems like there's something going on in the world that we, just to have a little bit of levity and
Yeah.
just thinking about things more positively and just making people, even if they don't laugh out loud, but even just to smile. That's certainly what we want to go for. And I just felt perfect. And it was so interesting because it created a lot of kind of discussion in the industry as well, and a lot of chatter around the idea of using nostalgia, because there were some
Yeah.
more brands who were kind of jumping onto that. It was so interesting because I think there were people in different camps. I think there was a lot of people who really saw value for it for the most part, and especially when you have something that's so iconic and ownable and still very relevant. So I think a lot of people thought, hey, why not? And there was also that discussion around, as marketers, we get more tired of an ad before
Oh, yeah.
consumers do. Like, who would imagine that a 20-year-old ad could still be relevant? I mean, after it aired twice, probably people should have said, oh, this is totally worn out now. But it wears out with us way faster than it does with the consumers. If anything, we should probably be more concerned about wear in, because probably, most
Yep.
brands don't even let a campaign run long enough to even wear it in to resonate. So, yeah.
I spoke to the kickoff for season 4 with Growing Your Wafer a few weeks ago from Diageo. So she's global marketing director for Guinness, Smirnoff, Bailey's. She made exactly the same point that you've made, which is she said, our ads don't even wear in. They don't even
Mhm.
begin to wear in. So I agree. And, that conversation it's a difficult one because I think even within an organization, people, even outside of marketing, because they're attuned, because you work somewhere, you're so attuned to it. You're like, I've seen that ad so much. You're like, that's because you're heightenedly aware
Mhm.
of it. And then everyone else is barely paying attention.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because we're not even just competing in the home furnishing category. We're competing with anything that's
Yeah.
out there, and I think a lot of people, forget about that. So I'm very much of that camp where you don't need to just do something shiny and new every single time, and I think just from a cost consciousness perspective, it's in your
Yeah.
best interest to also look at if you're putting that much money into any production that you do, why not get the most that you can out of it and run it multiple times and, it's just marketing 101
Yeah.
around
Yeah.
repetition, right?
100%. 100%. We touched on it a bit there, and I'd love to kind of now get your in Canada role. And one of the things as we're talking, there's a lot of things that you're saying about IKEA that I'm saying about IKEA that are exactly the same, right? So
Mhm.
some of the ads, I know the experience in store are quite similar. How now in your role heading up marketing in Canada for IKEA, are you interacting with international marketing, and how does that kind of the guardrails work for you? And I'd love to kind of understand how that all operates.
Yeah, for sure. I think when I first came to IKEA, I was really intrigued by how things were done, and I'll admit that it continues to evolve, and we still kind of learn and grow. But I think what I did like was that it felt like there was this nice balance between global work and local work. So I think it can be tricky. This is a struggle for all brands when it comes
Yeah.
to how do you make sure your brand comes to life in a consistent way and in an authentic way across these different markets. I had a lot of learnings of BlackBerry around this too. And again, just starting from scratch where we were more local than growing into this big global brand. And then entering new markets all the time, it became very difficult to try to do everything in the exact same way. There's a lot of global content that gets created. We have this repertoire of images, so I don't have to worry about taking an image of that product or that product with my team because we have a huge library of product shots that are on white background, different living situations with people, without people, anything you can possibly
Right.
imagine is there. Of course, sometimes it can be tricky to find certain cultural nuances that you want.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
would say that things have gotten better over the years, but there's a lot of things that can't be captured at scale like that to make sure that it really meets the local needs. So of course we can't do everything that way, but there's a lot of things we have at our disposal and even other assets that are just about ready to go where we can have access to working files of things, whether it's video files or different assets we could use for social media or sometimes even full-blown campaigns where needed. Feels like a little bit of a menu in a way, so we can see all the assets we have at our disposal, look at it. We often involve our agency partners in that
Right.
process as well to really look at, okay, what's going to work for us, considering our media buy, considering Canadian consumers, and how do we adapt and localize. And of course, we have the whole French speaking part of Canada
I was
and
gonna say
Quebec.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so we have to do a lot there. And it's not just about translating in that case. It's almost like having another
Yeah.
country in some ways where you look at that there's so many different cultural nuances, even the sense of humor in that part of the country can look different. So we have to treat it in a different way as opposed to just a straight up translation. But we do work really closely and we share and we learn, from other markets. We're a very close knit community across the IKEA world. So it's not uncommon that we reach out to each other to understand, like, what was your strategy
Yeah.
for this? Or we're facing a similar dilemma, like, oh, I know that you had done this type of thing in the past. Like, what can we learn from what you did?
It's brilliant to have that kind of network of peers that will have had a similar enough challenge to you, and the fact that they're in the same business, it's like
Yeah.
this, academy almost of, marketers that are probably doing great work in their own
Yeah.
market that you can lean into and kind of
Oh,
get
yeah.
those questions
Yeah,
answered.
we steal with pride quite a
Yeah.
bit from each other where needed. I mean, right down to whether it's campaigns, but even other things too. We're like, hey, has anyone done a business case for this before? We're trying
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah,
do this
yeah.
in our market. And, so it is really incredible to have that, kind of relationship with other people. And I think for myself, having been part of these different parts of the organization, it also helps because I've had to reach out and, phone a friend to say, hey, do you think we could get some support with this? I'm not sure about this. Can, you maybe give us some guidance, and they'll do the same with me too, just to have the reference market for global work that's happening to make sure that we have the right voices at the table from around the world on other work that's happening.
Speaking of voiceovers, I have to ask you, over here, the voiceover artist has a Swedish accent. Is that the same in Canada?
Yeah, so not on everything that we do, but
Okay.
that's part of actually how we are able to lean into more of our Swedishness. But we have this famous Jonas character that we use. It's been in our radio ads for many, many, many years. So very unique.
Yeah,
When people hear his voice on the
I
radio,
know. Yeah.
it's IKEA. It's very distinct. And then there are some of our TV ads where we've incorporated his voice as well. I think that ownability that we have, the real Swedishness that no one else can
Yeah.
duplicate for sure. So I think it's such a great opportunity for us to be able to leverage that where we can.
100%. You touched a bit there on kind of a couple of times talking about kind of the media landscape. It's a large country. I know media is not cheap in Canada as well from experience. So how do you think about your media mix? Because again, I would imagine, and you touched on it a bit there, kind of pressures like it's a footfall business, well, footfall and web traffic, right? But I don't know what the balance is for you. But how do you think
Yeah.
about kind of navigating those pressures to get people in store, get people online, and then how the media mix shows up versus kind of brand performance, that usual debate?
Yeah, well, for sure. Yeah, it's a huge dilemma, and especially because, my team is responsible for that visitation KPI. So it's always top of mind for us in terms of what we're doing there. And I think for us, we're really fortunate in the sense that, IKEA really looks at wanting to have that balance, knowing that, yes, we want to drive that visitation. There are certainly short-term objectives that we
Mhm.
have to achieve, but we also are trying to build a brand that will continue to stand the test of time for another 80 some years again in the future and beyond. When it comes to how we're investing, I think the great thing is that I think there's a lot of appreciation for prioritizing investment in long-term brand
Right.
building and these top of funnel type of work, and then balancing that out with term commercial activation support, because of course we have a very robust commercial calendar that also needs to be supported. But I think a big part of what has helped us to kind of find that recipe, which we're always continuing to tinker with, of course, but I think one of the things that also has helped us with selling in the approach with the organization has been the introduction of econometrics, and to be able to show our return on investment to the organization and to better understand how marketing and many other factors were contributing to many of our objectives like sales and visitation. Although we know we do a lot of heavy lifting with marketing, we also know that, we're not the only thing contributing. So we don't
Yeah.
want to take all the credit for that. Let's be realistic. But I think it kind of gave us this language and the tools to be able to have those
Right.
conversations, including like the media optimization tools that kind of come along with that, to be able to realize, okay, so what channels are really working for us around certain KPIs that we're going after? What channels are less effective for us? So we can really find that balance. I think it's one of those things where there's a lot of times and you have to do a little bit of myth busting to be when people think, oh, TV's dead. Why do we
Yeah.
even advertise there? I'm like, well, actually, it's not. And so we have the econometrics to show it. But I think it really shows how we can kind of maximize our ROI and really show to the organization that marketing is it's not just a cost line, but it's actually a really smart investment that can help you grow. And of course, this requires some experimentation too,
Yeah.
because especially when you get new formats coming into the mix that you don't have historical data about, because we do know econometrics is more about looking back, what you've already done. So for me, it's also like looking at what has been working really well for us and continuing with that, but then also being willing to take some risks.
Yeah.
I think it's meant it's easy for people to go after the shiny new ad formats or things that might get some good press. But really taking a critical look at when thinking, okay, is this a good fit for us as a brand
Yeah.
and for our objectives as well? Or do we sit back and let others go first and then jump on board?
And so would you assign like a certain budget? Like this year, we're going to spend this amount on testing and learning. Like it's a assigned
Yeah,
almost.
yeah. Usually we'll
By,
do like a percent. We kind of called it an innovation lab that we worked
yeah.
with our media agency partners and would come with, a bit of a dilemma that that we knew that we needed to develop something about it. And then we bring in partners that normally wouldn't even be on our usual list, to work with, to come in and pitch ideas of how they could bring something to life for us. And we actually did that last year when we were introducing our gaming line. So of course, IKEA hasn't necessarily been known for gaming, but we have some really great products for the gamers out there. My son and daughter being part of that community these days as well. So we thought, how do we develop a campaign that we can reach kind of a new audience that we probably
Yeah.
haven't been reaching so much before? So of course, this was very much new territory for many of us. And then we ended up working with a few different partners to look at ideas, and then landed on working with the platform Twitch, which I had been familiar with more so from a music and DJing perspective, that I've, watched different streams from there. But, I'm not a gamer myself either, but I knew that, even with my kids watching that, there was a big audience. So ended up partnering with them, doing a live stream from one of our stores, and partnered with a content creator who has a huge following. He just games, all the time. He also cooks, so we could work in the food element. But yeah, it was really neat. And, and just really reaching people that we wouldn't have thought that we could have reached, and really integrated into this stream that lasted a couple of hours, and introducing IKEA and getting on that consideration set for a group of people who probably would have never thought about IKEA at that time.
And I was really lucky. I got to work in a similar type of thing. You call it a testing lab. It was why we needed the word lab, I don't know, but
Yeah, I know. It makes it kind of
lab.
official and scientific, I guess. So.
But it is really interesting to see what are the things that you can do. And I think for me, the big learning I got out of that time was structure around it, because like you said, you could just get distracted by the shiny thing. So actually having really good structure around what are we going in, what are we trying to find out, can we measure it, what decisions will we make after doing this, like, were really important questions to have. And then you can kind of go, right, well, now we know. We stopped doing stuff because we couldn't answer some of those questions. We're like, well, we could do this, but we don't know what we would do if we did. Well, that sounds like a waste of money. So
yeah, for sure. And that's the thing. And sometimes you see these things come out, and you're like, oh, wow, that's so cool. Maybe it's not the best fit for us as a brand. It kind of takes that willingness to try something new and see what happens.
Yeah, I think it's a mindset as well. We're at time, but I want to ask you kind of a last question. Speaking of shiny new things, the big topic I think going into 2025 has been, and will continue to be, AI, and how AI is kind of form part of what marketers need to do, need to learn. How is that conversation with IKEA? Like, is it being used centrally? You can possibly see some of the scale opportunities with it. But also, I think the other part for me is, I know IKEA is incredibly environmentally conscious, sustainability agenda. How does it fit in with that? So I'd just love to get your perspective on how kind of AI is coming up, I guess, in conversations at this stage.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is very much top of mind for many people across function, from a marketing perspective. There's always a bit of fear with these new things. And I think even, of course, being in a big organization from a security perspective as well.
Yeah.
So we have a specific AI tool that we can use just to, make sure that we can safe mark our data and everything like that. So of course that is a big issue for a lot of people. But luckily, globally, they had gotten ahead of that, knowing that there would be many people who would want to be working with AI. So let's find a way to make sure that we can enable people to do it. in a safe way. But I think from the marketing perspective, there's a few kind of different ways that we've been looking at it. And, a lot of this is in conjunction with agency partners as well. Sometimes within my team, they may be using it to help inform with some brief writing. I think they would never let AI do the entire thing
Yeah.
because we certainly believe in the human touch and being able to synthesize other insights and knowledge, but sometimes it can help, in certain areas of the brief where needed. We've also been using it within creative concepting process, whether that be with testing or even just helping to sell ideas internally with visuals. So it's obviously less time consuming to kind of put
Yeah.
those visuals together. Some people can't maybe understand how something might look. So it's really become a bit of a shortcut to say, well, this is not it exactly.
Yes.
Again,
Yeah.
AI
Yeah.
generated. But it could be in this realm, and we can kind of speak to that as well. I really look at it as something that can be used to help complement and be a bit of a helper, but certainly not a replacement for many of the things that we're doing. I think there's still that element of that human touch that's needed. And, as we say a lot of the things that we do, we're using both our head and our heart.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that are informed by data and insights to help make decisions, but sometimes there's other things that come into the mix as well. And I don't think AI can quite capture some of that at this point and in the way
Yeah.
that we need. So staying open to it for sure,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
also, trying to be realistic about it's not going to solve everything for us. Let's use it where we can if it can help us be more efficient.
Yeah. And I think, again, probably that cultural, we talked a bit about testing and, having that curiosity that you clearly have, you're going to be open to it and have the team be open to it, which I think is what we need, because, the fear of it is, some people are just almost against it, kind of going, oh, no, it's never going to do. And so I think that's, to me, is more of a risk, is you've got to start thinking about how it can enhance. And even you're a brilliant example of it helps bring something to life that actually can move something along faster in the business. Brilliant.
Mhm.
What a great use of the tools. So,
Yeah.
Chel, thank you so much for taking the time out to chat to me. I was really looking forward to it. Absolute pleasure. And best of luck with 2025 IKEA Canada.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation. I think we probably could have talked for many more hours on
Yeah.
on the topic. So yeah, I really appreciate it. And yeah, looking forward to exciting things ahead. We have some interesting things right around the corner coming up.
Amazing. I'll be keeping an eye out for those. Thanks a million.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode with Jonelle. What an amazing person. And when we finished, actually, I was like, I could have spent 2 hours or 3 hours talking to you. I feel Jonelle is somebody I've known for so long. Really wonderful. And actually, I pointed out to her that in her story, talking about getting that opportunity and being on holidays with her family in Tenerife and getting that call, the doubt she may have had in herself and her abilities. I was almost, okay, I know the end of the story, but I was like, I can imagine how brilliant she is to work for. You can tell she looks to get great work, do great work, enjoy what she's doing. And she said it to me, she like working with great people and sound people, as I often talk about. So I really connected really well with Jonelle on this episode. That's what I call marketing. And it was her first ever podcast. Would you believe that? No, you most certainly wouldn't. Well, listen, that is it for today's episode of That's What I Call Marketing. I hope you enjoy getting insight into IKEA and how it operates. We'll be back again with another new episode, so stay tuned for that. Of course, if you subscribe, you will never miss an episode again. If you rate and review the shows, of course, it helps us reach even more people who've yet to hear about That's What I Call Marketing. Can you believe it? And our sponsorship kit for 2025 is available, so just get in touch or go to that'swhatIcallmarketing.com/sponsor, and I will be able to talk to you all about that. We'd love to get involved with more great sponsors. We had an incredible 10 sponsors in 2024. So from me, your host, Conor Byrne, as always, thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it.
If you would like to reach an engaged community of marketing leaders, get in touch with That's What I Call Marketing to discuss sponsorship opportunities.